Hello, everybody. Welcome to Breakfast All Day. Alonso here with Matt and Christy. And Alex Winter has been having a good year. People seem to like the Bill and Ted movie more than I did. It just made Stephanie Zacharyk's 10 Best of the Year list on Time Magazine. Go figure. But he is back now as a director of the Years in the Making documentary Zappa about legendary musician Frank Zappa, which I believe he made in conjunction with the Zappa estate, and he's gotten access to tons and tons and tons of material, which we see in the film. Matt?
Yeah, this is a movie that's somewhat years in the making in that there was this huge archive that the Zappa estate had a hold of, but it needed to be kind of preserved and restored. So they first started off a Kickstarter to do some of the restoration and preservation of all of this film. Then he worked with Gail Zappa and then Dweezil to kind of get all of this together. Gail Zappa died shortly after Winter had recorded some interviews with her. Access that these films and footage allows for is pretty stunning. And if you're not a huge Zappa fan, it's still hard to overlook and kind of miss that he was this hugely influential figure going all the way back to kind of that Laurel Canyon era, then through the 80s as he went up against the
PMRC.
Congress and the PRMC,
Parents Music Resource
right, the mothers of prevention, so to speak. And dude was an amazing musician, had considered himself a composer more than anything else. The movie covers a lot of what he worked on. It still kind of feels like there's some missing pieces, but I really enjoyed this. Partly because of all the people that Winter gets a hold of and talks to, not the least of which is Steve Vai, one of the arguably best rock and roll guitarists to have ever picked up the guitar, worked with Zappa for years, is often credited as the guy who played the impossible guitar parts on Zappa records. As you may have guessed, I have a few Zappa records of my own.
Are you a fan, Matt?
I am a fan. Yeah, I'm a fan. And this movie really captures, an iconoclastic figure and a guy who, somewhat surprisingly, wasn't a drug user, but, didn't really feel like it was a big deal if other people wanted to. It just wasn't his thing. Took what he did extremely seriously. And, in spite of what may seem like, a succession of novelty records, he was a very serious musician and a very demanding musician. And you hear that from some of the people that, some of his former bandmates that talk to him. There's, some stories about how some of the guys in the Wrecking Crew did never really take him seriously until they worked with him and then realized, oh shit, this person's amazing. And yeah, I really like this documentary. If you are not familiar with Zappa's work, it's worth looking at because this is a guy who really did end up casting a long shadow, even though it may not be obvious, even just for the PMRC stuff. And the movie gets into nobody else was going up against them. And Zappa was the only one that was really kind of outspoken.
I mean, it was him, Dee Snider, and John Denver. Like that was it.
Yeah.
Because I think anybody who was not, we learn a lot about sort of Zappa's business acumen and the fact that he, divorced himself from major labels and started his own. But I think anybody who was involved with the industry was not going to get into that. And so it was incumbent upon people like Zappa to take the bullet and really, be the public face and be the loud advocate for the rights of artists.
Yeah, I was not a big Frank Zappa fan. I, of course, love Valley Girl because I was 10 years old growing up in the Valley when Valley Girl came out, and I did not get that song was satire.
It's aspirational for you, right?
I just thought she was hilarious and I wanted to be like her. Yeah. But that's interesting how, and that was the only hit he ever had.
Right.
And he didn't even care about that because, as Matt points out, he was really serious and wanted to be taken seriously. And that song was a lark. But the reason that song exists is because he was such a workaholic and he was gone so much and he was so obsessively in his own head that he wasn't the most attentive and present dad in the world. So Moon Zappa puts a note under his door and it says, "Hi, my name is Moon. I live in this house with you. I'm your daughter. And by the way, I do this really great Encino girl voice." And she just wanted to hang out with her dad. And that's what ended up giving him the song that really is probably his best known for people who aren't familiar with his catalog. Yeah, one thing I really appreciate here is that it is far from worshipful of Frank Zappa. I mean, there's a deep appreciation for his musicianship, certainly, and his brilliant mind and his creativity, but like he's kind of an asshole. And the movie does not shy away from depicting him as such. I mean, from having, the various musicians who work with him say like, he shook my hand once, or he would just dismiss me, and he was really exacting and demanding of people. It's an interesting contrast, right? Because you see his live shows, especially at like the Whiskey A Go-Go in the late 60s, and they're like orgiastic. I mean, they're like people cavorting and he made it all seem weird and wild and amorphous and fun. But when it came to the actual doing of the thing, he was a perfectionist and he was really cold. So that was a fascinating contradiction. And I appreciated learning all that about him. It'd be easy to be, worshipful, and this film never is.
Yeah, I've never been particularly a fan myself, and at least I'd never really heard anything that made me go like, oh, I need to know more about this guy. But I learned so much about him, and so much about in just as kind of a cultural history. Like, I think it has changed the way that I think about him. I think before I sort of thought of him as just like, oh, this 60s rock guy, and his music is whatever. But I think now I'm more inclined to think of him in terms of like John Zorn or somebody. Like, this is a 20th century American composer, and he had these really sort of kind of challenging ideas and sort of trying to move music forward and creating these soundscapes that he could hear in his head and was just sort of trying to figure out how to communicate them. And, like, I think he's somebody you look on with, maybe in a category with somebody like Glenn Gould, who's like a brilliant musician, maybe not the most personable person in the world. And so, so I think this film is really fascinating. If you're deeply steeped in all things Zappa, you'll probably still learn things and just be fascinated with who they talk to and how it's structured and a lot of the backstory and stuff. But even if, like me, you're coming in with no real strong feelings about him, it is just a really well-told life story. And, you do even see the archive itself that they're working from, these just rows and rows and rows of boxes of videotape and film and all this stuff. And so, obviously it was an exhaustive effort on the part of Alex Winter to catalog that stuff, find the best moments to use in the film, and then combine with some new interviews. But it is mostly vintage because there's just so much to work with. This is really well put together.
Yeah, one of the things I liked about this is early on Zappa talks about his sort of obsession with the composer Varese, who was doing these very, very challenging pieces to listen to. And so that kind of sets the tone for what Zappa's trying to do with a lot of his music. And the movie does talk about what a kind of tyrannical band leader he was, and how he would just pivot and start using different people without really telling anyone. And then how he starts working with the synclavier, because that's the only thing at the time that can recreate what he's trying to make happen. And so when you get the payoff later as he goes and works with those musicians in Europe, that's really fascinating. Or when he's talking about, he's teaching that class and he says, okay, I want everybody to play one note. They play the note. Then he goes back. He's like, all right, now I want you to put everything into that note, your tremolo, whatever you want to do. And it's this, what I think Winter captures really well is, if not so much what makes Zappa tick, but why he was different, and what really, you do get a good sense of not just that he was composing, but what he was really trying to do with the music. I dug this a lot.
I learned a lot too about his childhood growing up in like Lancaster, which was a conservative place and still very much is. But the idea that he was playing with a band of white and black musicians at a time where that was just shocking and unheard of, and
the whole thing with the recording
criminal.
the recording studio and going to jail, like that was all new to me.
Yeah, it gets its arms around a lot in a pretty. It's like 2 hours long, and but you go on a journey. So yeah, I'm not sure I want to go and listen to Zappa music now, but I appreciate him as a musical genius.
I would maybe listen to the album he did with the London Symphony. That seemed like it was kind of interesting.
So I'm saying 7.5.
So am I.
What did I say?
You said 7.5 also?
Yeah, 7.5. Yeah.
Let's do that. Let's all say 7.5.
Okay.
And this is playing on a bunch of different places like iTunes and Google Play and Amazon. I think it's, across all streaming platforms. So go check it out.
Yeah, good stuff. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. Like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us at BeFastAllDay on social media, and check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/BeFastAllDay. We're talking The Mandalorian. We're talking The Queen's Gambit. Other fun stuff coming up in the next few weeks for our subscribers. So do give that a look. And until next time, bye.
Bye.